Cultural relativism versus ethnocentrism. Human beings live in societies that are filled with traditions, beliefs, values, and ways of life that shape how they see the world. When people from different societies interact, they often notice that the customs of others are not the same as their own. Some might find these differences fascinating, while others might feel that their own way of life is superior. This is where two important concepts come into play: cultural relativism and ethnocentrism. These terms help us understand how people view cultural differences and how those views can influence relationships between societies, groups, and even individuals. Cultural relativism is the idea that all cultures should be understood and judged within their own context rather than being compared to another culture. It means trying to see things from the perspective of the people who belong to that culture. For example, in some cultures eating with chopsticks is the norm, while in others people use spoons, forks, or even their hands. A cultural relativist does not say one way is better than the other, but instead recognizes that each practice makes sense in its own cultural setting. This approach encourages open-mindedness and reduces the tendency to stereotype or criticize others for being different. On the other hand, ethnocentrism is the belief that one's own culture is superior to others. It happens when people use their own cultural norms as the standard to judge other groups. An ethnocentric person may see their customs as normal and consider other ways of life strange, wrong, or even inferior. For instance, someone from a society that values individualism may think that cultures focused on collective family decisions are backward, or less advanced. Ethnocentrism can create misunderstandings, prejudice, and even conflict, because it prevents people from appreciating diversity. The difference between these two perspectives becomes very clear when we think about real-life situations. Imagine a traveler from a Western country visiting a village where elders play the most important role in decision-making. If the traveler is ethnocentric, they might see the system as outdated and criticize it for not allowing younger people to make choices. But if the traveler practices cultural relativism, they will try to understand why respect for elders is central in that community, recognizing the wisdom and social harmony it brings. This shift in attitude can mean the difference between fostering respectful relationships and causing offense. Cultural relativism is not about agreeing with everything another culture does, but about suspending judgment long enough to understand why certain practices exist. It asks us to acknowledge that every culture develops its own solutions to the challenges of life. For example, marriage customs vary greatly across societies. Some cultures value arranged marriages, while others prioritize love-based marriages. A cultural relativist does not quickly label one as oppressive or the other as ideal. Instead, they try to understand the social, historical, and economic reasons behind those practices. This does not mean accepting harmful practices without critique, but it does encourage careful consideration before rushing to judgment. Ethnocentrism, in contrast, often blinds people to these deeper understandings. History is full of examples where ethnocentrism has caused harm. Colonial powers, for instance, often viewed the societies they conquered as uncivilized because they did not share the same religion, dress, or political systems. This belief justified domination, exploitation, and destruction of local traditions. Even today, ethnocentrism can be seen when people dismiss entire cultures as primitive or irrational, without trying to learn more about them. Such thinking limits cooperation and mutual respect in an increasingly globalized world. Cultural relativism has its critics too. Some argue that it may lead to moral relativism, where harmful practices could be justified simply because they are part of a culture. For example, practices that violate human rights cannot be excused just because they are traditional. This shows that while cultural relativism is useful for understanding differences, it should be balanced with universal values like respect for human dignity. The challenge is to appreciate diversity without turning a blind eye to injustice. When we compare cultural relativism and ethnocentrism, it becomes clear that they lead to very different outcomes. Cultural relativism promotes tolerance, respect, and dialogue, while ethnocentrism creates division, arrogance, and conflict. In today's interconnected world, where people from diverse backgrounds interact daily, cultural relativism helps build bridges and encourages cooperation. Ethnocentrism, on the other hand, can fuel stereotypes, racism, and discrimination. On a personal level, adopting cultural relativism can enrich one's life. It allows people to learn from others, broaden their worldview, and discover alternative ways of living. It teaches humility by showing that no culture has all the answers. Ethnocentrism, however, limits personal growth because it keeps individuals trapped in the belief that their way is the only right way. To put it simply, cultural relativism asks us to step into someone else's shoes and see the world from their perspective, while ethnocentrism insists that our shoes are the only ones worth wearing. Both attitudes exist in society, but the choice between them shapes how peaceful, respectful, and cooperative our world can be. In conclusion, cultural relativism and ethnocentrism are two contrasting ways of looking at cultural differences. Cultural relativism opens doors to understanding, tolerance, and global harmony, while ethnocentrism closes them with prejudice and superiority. The key lesson is not to abandon one's own culture, but to recognize that others have valid ways of living too. As human beings, we can choose whether to judge or to understand, whether to divide or to connect. The future of a peaceful world depends on how often we choose understanding over judgment. If you found this explanation helpful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more insightful discussions on sociology, philosophy, and the way we understand human society.